I am sure each one of us seated in this hall have enjoyed every moment. Have you? I can't hear you. Yes, that's it. And all these children deserve our applause. The choir, the violinists, the teachers who have been instrumental in producing such a wonderful play. I'm sure you can clap louder, parents. Thank you so much. Before we move on further, I would like to request our governing body member, Mrs. Lorena De Cruz, to please say a few words to our children and our teachers.
Before I address the crowd, I would like to address you children. Y'all have put up a marvelous performance. I have no words of praise for you because y'all have done so well. And I think before anything else, I would like you all to give yourselves a clap, a real good clap. Because I know how much you have worked to put on this production. And I think you really deserve all the claps and everything that you have been getting today. Parents, I think you can be justifiably proud of what your children have done today. What they have put on is something marvelous, and when I stop to think that they are primary children, classes 1 to 5, that means there are children over here from class 1 who have really put on a flawless performance. To the choir, you've given fantastic support to the performers, and my congratulations go to you as well. So there's nothing more I can say except that well done all round.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I request Pastor James, who also has drama at the core of his heart, to say a few words.
Well, can't say much after what Mrs. De Cruz has already said. You know, it's been a fantastic show, and all these little children, 1 to 5, amazing. I don't think we did anything like this when we were in school, you know, and to see them perform so beautifully, all the, applause is not enough to say or to express how well they have performed today, I'd also like to, appreciate those teachers that have worked so hard to make them, perform like this today. Wonderful work. Congratulations. God bless all of you. And the choir, I always love to hear the choir, and this choir is fabulous in Undri, always. Excellent. Well done. Even to the choir master. Well done, sir. God bless you all. Excellent job. Well done, children. Well done. Well done.
Thank you so much, sir. And before we go on further, I request our principal to please come up. And we would like to felicitate our governing body members and many of our guests who are here. So I request sir to kindly present a small token of our gratitude. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. I think I forgot something very important and special. I have to say a big thank you and a fantastic job to the art department and all that we have seen on this stage. I forgot to say that. My wife, who's an artist, she said, better go and tell them. So I said, okay. But it is a fabulous job. You can see for yourselves. Wonderful.
Thank you, sir. I begin with Mrs. Lorena De Cruz, our governing body member. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your presence and your time today and for all the words that you have told our caste and the teachers. Please put your hands together, dear parents. To Pastor James. Thank you so much for your support. I think without the governing body, we would not be able to do many of the things we do. I'm sure you can clap louder, parents. Children, you can please be seated wherever you are. Please sit. Please sit down. To the principal of the Bishop School Camp and Honorary Secretary, Mr. Macpherson. Clap, children. To our headmaster, Mr. Russell. Thank you, Mr. Russell, for all your help whenever required. Please put your hands together, parents. I'm sure you're not tired as much as the children. A very big thank you to my colleagues, Mrs. Christina Dunn and Ms. Barse, for always supporting and being there for us. Thank you so much, Mrs. Dunn. Thanks. Come on, children, you can clap. Ms. Barse, headmistress of the Bishop School Camp. Thanks, darling. God bless you. To Dr. Mrs. Ulfat Beg, our junior college coordinator. Thank you, Mrs. Beg, for all your help. I'm sure you can clap louder, parents. Children, I now request sir to please wait here for a moment, and I request Mrs. De Cruz to please come up. Dear parents, today, as I stand here before you, I would like each of you to put your hands together for a man who stands tall for the Bishop's Co-ed School Undri, no other than our principal, Mr. Julian Luke. The kind of support that I as a headmistress have received, not only me, but my entire team of teachers, our children, as you see, with that kind of support, what we can produce is just a proof before your eyes. Please put your hands together for our principal, Mr. Julian Luke. Thank you, sir, so much for everything. Thank you, sir. Sachin. I now request sir to kindly wait for a moment, and we would just like to give a small memento of our play to Mrs. Jolly. Mrs. Jolly, ma'am, please come. Please put your hands together, parents. No, not at all, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you for coming. And Mrs. O'Connor. Clap, children. Thank you, sir. As you are aware, such a production is not possible without having an entire team of teachers who have really striven over the last few days. They have put in their heart and soul. And I could actually visualize many of our teachers within the roles of the children that were depicted on stage. Without any delay, first I request ma'am, Mrs. De Cruz, our governing body member, to kindly present these mementos of Into the Woods, which have been specially designed for all our teachers who have worked very hard. To the pillars of our team, Mrs. Pillay and Mrs. Didi, the coordinating directors who have worked so very hard in ensuring that the entire play was looked into and done beautifully. Please clap for them, children, come on. Our segment directors were no less than that and who have also worked equally hard. Mrs. P. Ganeshan, Mrs. Savita Pillai, come ma'am. Mrs. D. Admane, Mrs. Joyce Kotak, Mrs. Jill Burgeon, Mrs. Kamaljeet Kaur, and Mrs. Rosie Baptist. Please clap for them, children. I know you've been in and out with these teachers over the last many days. Please keep the clapping going. Thank you, teachers, for everything that you have done. As you have witnessed the many dances, each dance so beautifully choreographed by none other than our teachers. So you can imagine the talents that our teachers have. To the choreographers, Miss Apurva Sonavne, Mrs. Smita Tripathi, Mrs. Pratiksha Wagmare, Mrs. Althea O'Malley, Mrs. Pratiksha Wagmare, Mrs. Althea O'Malley. Come on, children, are you tired? Mr. Jesse Gotting, Mrs. Triola Dominic, Miss Simran Marion, Mrs. Martina Anthony, and Mrs. Himani Singh. Please give them a loud round of applause. As Pastor James rightly said, the beautiful decor that you see, the sets, the beautiful sets to the left, right, everywhere, props. This credit goes to none other than our art department, Mrs. Poonam Sharma. Come, ma'am. Please put your hands as loud as you can, dear parents. Mrs. Amruta Darekar, Mr. Santosh Salunke, Mrs. Sharma, are they here? Come, ma'am, quickly. Mr. Nathoba Pandey, Mr. Srimant Lad, Mrs. Snehal Vaiti, and Mr. Nilesh Karande. Thank you so much for all your efforts. Please continue clapping. Yeah. A very important individual that is Miss Gloria Barnabas, who actually wrote out the script. Miss Gloria Barnabas, wherever you are, I'm sure you can do louder than that, parents. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you. I'll request Pastor James to do the honors, please. We move on to the music department. We have Mr. K. Chauming Liana, Mrs. Blossom Semois, Mr. Amar Mane, Miss Ruth Cornelius, Mrs. Sophie Fernandez, who heads the music department, Mrs. Elaine Mascarenas, and Mr. Fonseca. Come on, choir, you can clap louder. Thank you so much, music department. Thank you very much for training our children with such beautiful songs. Keep clapping, children. Thank you, Sophie. I'm sure the clap will be the loudest for Mr. Fonseca. Just as loud as he shouts at you. Thank you so much, sir. For the spotlight, we have Mr. Ben David and Mr. Christopher Morant. Thank you, Mr. David and Mr. Morant. They come. Children, please clap. Parents, please. One more. I begin with Team A. There are many teachers who have made many of the props that you saw on stage, besides the art department. In Team A, we have Mrs. Mary Ann Young, Mrs. N. Khan, Miss T. Salvi, Mrs. D. Kutapelli, Miss R. Ahir, and Mrs. R. Rodrigues. Please clap for them. Thank you, teachers. Please clap, children. Team B, we have Mrs. E. Vanlalwati, Mrs. C. Vibhute, Mrs. S. Suryavanshi, and Mrs. Lai. Mrs. Gretorix, that's Mrs. Lindsay, and Mrs. R. Bell. Team C, just wait. Thank you, Pastor James. I now request Mr. MacPherson, the Principal and Honorary Secretary of the Bishops Education Society. We begin with Team C. We have Mrs. S. Manare, Ms. S. Gotting, Mrs. D. Borde, Mrs. N. Sheikh, Mrs. H. Narona, and Mrs. L. Taiparambal. Team D, we have Mrs. Y. Gotting, Mrs. A. Lakdawala, Mrs. S. Kamble, Mrs. A. Naylor, Miss L. Swami, and Mrs. C. Daniel. Thank you so much, teachers. A special thanks to our coordinator, Mrs. Manju Marin of the second session, who was also instrumental in the costume designing along with Mrs. Hina Sheikh. Please clap for them, dear parents. A special thanks to our junior school coordinator of classes 2 to 5, Mr. Sean Francis, who has held the fort in Building 3 while so many teachers were out for their practices. Please put your hands together for Mr. Francis. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. I now request our principal, Mr. Luke to kindly give away the next mementos, list of mementos. To our junior school coordinator of the second session, Mr. Greg Godfrey. Thank you, Mr. Godfrey, for holding the fort while our children were out. No words are sufficient for the next team. I think it has been the most challenging aspect of this play. The digital presentation done by none other than our computer department. Mrs. Margaret Marion, Mr. Paul Raj Thomas. Please put your hands together. Come on, parents and teachers. These teachers have had sleepless nights. Mr. Paul Raj Thomas, Mrs. A. Kamte, Mrs. Rabia Sheikh, and Mrs. Triveni Dharapanavar. Thank you very much, teachers, for all the hard work that you have put in. I now hand over the mic to Mr. Greg Godfrey, who will now call out the rest of the names. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. The success of tonight's concert wouldn't have been possible without the dedication of our State Department. A huge thanks goes out to the State Department headed by Mr. Alan Lindsay. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for our State Department. Mr. J. Selvam and Mr. J. Pereira. We are fortunate to have a diligent and hospitable kitchen in charge. Sir has kept all the students as well as the teachers energized with refreshments whenever needed. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Mr. J. Sigamani. Well, I think sir is down. We appreciate the hard work done by our tailor, Mrs. Bhavna Agarwal, for putting in all the efforts and turning our performers into the characters they've portrayed. Ladies and gentlemen, all right, ma'am isn't with us this evening. The magic of the concert was not only on the stage, but also behind the curtains. Ladies and gentlemen, the smooth transition between the scenes was only possible because of the backstage crew. So as loud as possible, can we hear it for the stage crew headed by Mrs. R. Benjamin, Class 5 Scouts and 3 Senior Scouts. Yes, parents and children, can we hear it for our backstage crew? Thank you, children. You may get back. We all have witnessed the mesmerizing sound and lighting effects, and the credit goes to Mr. Sanjay Virmani. Please put your hands together, ladies and gentlemen. A special mention to one of our ex-bishopites. His name is Tete Kiangte. The backing tracks of the songs sung by the choir was made by him. Unfortunately, he isn't here, so I'm going to ask his father, Mr. Chow Ming Liana, to kindly accept a small token of our love and appreciation. A big thank you to our carpenters who have transformed our vision into reality. I'll quickly call upon Mr. Vikas Sonavne and Mr. Stephen Das. Parents, we have another 5 minutes. The louder you clap, the faster you leave. Thank you. To our hard-working electricians for making our concert technically flawless. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Mr. Gokul Mogre, Mr. Amit Chauhan, Mr. Ritesh Jadhav, and Mr. Vidya Sagar Shelke. The magic of a concert has been captured. The magic of a concert has been captured by a photographer, Mr. Abhay Patnankar. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for our photographer. At Bishops, we believe in teamwork. It was just not our teachers, but even all our support staff who have made this concert a success. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for our support staff headed by the two supervisors, Mrs. Dipali and Mrs. Vishranti. Mrs. Rajeshri and Mrs. Sarita. Mr. Janesh Wesar, Mrs. Manisha Kamle, and Mrs. Archana More. The decor that we see in the auditorium is done by none other than Mr. Mogre. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Mr. Mogre. All right, I think sir is not in the auditorium. I now hand over to Mrs. M. Pillai.
Thank you, sir. On behalf of the entire junior school, we would like to extend our heartfelt gratitude to our headmistress, Mrs. Melissa Fernandez, for her constant support and guidance to make this event a grand success. Ma'am, your constant presence and words of encouragement and motivation and belief has always inspired our children and us to move beyond their aspirations. I request our principal, the captain of our ship, Mr. Julian Luke, to present a token of our heartfelt gratitude to our headmistress, Mrs. Melissa Fernandez. Let's hear it for her. Children, come on. I now request Mr. Fonseca to kindly take over.
Good night, everybody, and Woo!
We sing a good song with a voice loud and strong. We chant nation's theme with a will. It's the school that we honor, the best school of all. Let our chorus now re-echo to the hill.
Stand to attention for the national anthem. Jana mana adinayaka jaya he Bharat bhagya vidhata Punjab Sindh Gujarat Maratha Dravida Utchala Banga Vindhya Himachala Yamuna Ganga Utchala Jalaki Taranga Tava Shubha Name Jage तव शुभ आशीष मागे गाहे तव जय गाथा जन गण